In a vast floating city powered by steam and gears, Princess Alara dreams of freedom beyond her golden cage. When she meets Kale, a daring mechanic from the lower caste, their worlds collide. Together, they uncover forbidden blueprints and ignite a rebellion that could either save their city or bring it crashing from the skies. Princess Alara's day began much like the countless ones before it, within the confines of her lavish chamber, encased by towering golden walls that gleamed under the soft morning light. The floating city, a marvel of steam and iron, hovered high above the clouds, its intricate gears and pistons humming in the distance like a giant mechanical beast breathing life into the skies. Yet for Alara, it was less a symbol of freedom and more a gilded cage. Each morning, she awoke to the same rigid expectations, appearances to maintain, lessons on governance to endure, and a life dictated by the caste into which she was born. Today, however, her spirit stirred with a restless energy, while the world outside her window shimmered with the steam and brass of the upper caste. Alara's gaze was fixed on the delicate blueprints spread before her on an oak desk, blueprints that whispered of gears, pistons, and the possibility of flight. The intricate designs were forbidden knowledge, remnants of a forgotten era when the city's ancient engines once soared freely. Her fingers traced the lines with reverence, heart pounding with secret hope. "Princess, your morning audience awaits." A soft voice interrupted her reverie. It was Mira, her loyal handmaid, who had grown accustomed to the princess's quiet defiance. Alara sighed, folding the precious papers carefully before tucking them beneath a stack of royal decrees. "Very well," she replied, smoothing her silver hair and donning the elegant but restrictive gown that marked her status. Down in the lower levels of the city, the world was a stark contrast. Here, soot stained every surface, and the clanking of machinery echoed through narrow alleys. Kale wiped the grime from his brow as he leaned over a sputtering engine, his hands deftly adjusting the gears and valves. The air was thick with the scent of oil and steam, and the bitter chill of metal against skin was a constant companion. This was the life of the lowest caster, life of grit, invention, and survival. "You're pushing it too hard," muttered Joran, his broad-shouldered friend, as he approached with a wary glance. "The council's been stepping up patrols. They're hunting rebels and mechanics like us." Kale shot him a determined look. "If these engines fail, the whole city falls. We don't have the luxury of fear." Back above, the rigid caste system was enforced, not only by law, but by the invisible walls of tradition and expectation. Lady Isolde, the princess's stern advisor, embodied this unyielding order. Her sharp eyes missed nothing as she reminded Alara of her duties and the dangers of straying from the path laid out for her. "The city depends on stability," Lady Isolde warned during a morning council meeting. "Your role is to uphold it, not to question it." Alara's heart clenched. Her secret fascination with the forbidden blueprints was a rebellion in itself, a quiet defiance against the chains of her birth. Yet she understood the risks discovery would mean ruin, not only for her, but for those she cared about. Still, the dream of flight, of breaking free from the invisible shackles, burned brighter than ever. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the city's vast mechanical heart groaned, a reminder of the delicate balance that held this floating world aloft. In the shadows between the castes, tension simmered, a brewing storm that neither Alara nor Kale could ignore. Their worlds were poised on a collision course, bound by the fragile threads of hope and fear. Alara's silver eyes flicked to the sealed door of her chamber beyond. It lay a life of golden chains. But within her, the spark of rebellion flickered, promising that one day those chains might shatter. Kale's hands tightened on the engine's controls, a silent vow to keep the city flying no matter the cost. And somewhere in the heart of the floating city, the gears of fate began to turn. The workshop was a sanctuary carved out of the sprawling lower city, a tangled nest of metal and steam where Kale could breathe free. The air here was thick with the scent of oil and hot iron, a sharp contrast to the perfumed halls and polished floors of the upper caste. Kale's hands moved swiftly, fingers steady despite the grime that coated them. He adjusted a tiny cog within a larger mechanism, the ancient flying engine that had once kept the floating city aloft in its prime. Each turn of the gear sent a ripple through the machine's intricate heart, a pulse of life rekindled by his touch. "You're at it again," came a familiar voice from the shadows. Joran emerged, his broad frame silhouetted by the flickering light of a gas lamp. His oil-stained hands rested on his hips, eyes sharp and calculating. Kale didn't look up immediately. "It's not just repair," he said. "It's a blueprint for freedom." Joran grunted. "Freedom's a dangerous thing to chase in these parts. The council keeps a tight grip on the skies and the people beneath them." Kale finally met his friend's gaze, the green of his eyes burning bright with conviction. "That grip is what we're breaking. One engine, one flight at a time." The two friends bent over a worn table cluttered with sketches and mechanical parts. Kale spread out a new designer, sleek, agile contraption that promised speed and stealth, a machine capable of carrying a few daring souls beyond the rigid caste boundaries. Joran's fingers traced the lines, skepticism mixing with reluctant admiration. "If this works," Kale whispered, "we could fly beyond the city's iron chains." Joran's laugh was low and rough. "And if it fails, we'll be lucky to survive the council's wrath." Their conversation was interrupted by the distant clang of boots against metal walkways. City guards patrolling, always watching. Both men froze, eyes locking in silent warning. The rebellion lived in shadows, and every step outside their workshop echoed with risk. As the guards passed, Kale's mind raced. He thought of the stories his mother once told. Before the accident that claimed her and left him orphan stories of endless skies and boundless dreams. Those tales were the fuel that kept his spirit alight even in the darkest hours. "Joran," Kale said quietly, "we're not just fixing machines, we're fixing our future." Joran nodded, but the weight of the city's caste system pressed heavily on them both. It was a world designed to keep people grounded, to keep dreamers like Kale and rebels like Joran tethered to their assigned places. Yet beneath the grime and steel, a spark glimmered. The mechanical rebellion was growing, fed by whispers and stolen blueprints, by the hope that the skies could belong to all. In the quiet moments after the guard's footsteps faded, Kale returned to his sketches, the lines flowing from his fingers like the wings he so desperately longed to build. Each stroke was a promise that one day the city would soar free, and so would they. But for now, the gears kept turning, and so did the risks. The rebellion was a fragile thing, balanced on the edge of discovery and destruction. And Kale knew that every choice he made could be the difference between flight and fall. Outside, the city hummed with the pulse of steam and iron, a living machine bound by tradition. Inside the workshop, two friends dreamed of breaking its chains one gear, one flight, one revolution at a time. As night deepened, the flickering lamps cast long shadows across the cluttered room, and Kale felt the electric thrill of possibility crackling in the air. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, but also new hope. He glanced at Joran, who was already poring over a tangle of wires and pistons, and smiled. Together, they would risk everything for a chance to rewrite the future. And in the heart of the floating city, amidst the gears and dreams, a rebellion was taking flight. The morning had arrived with an uneasy stillness that clung to the floating city like a thick fog. Princess Alara stood on the edge of her gilded balcony. The ornate rail cooled beneath her fingertips as her pale blue eyes scanned the sprawling metropolis suspended above the clouds. The city's intricate lattice of gears and steam vents shimmered in the weak light. But today the usual hum of machinery was disrupted by an unsettling silence, broken only by the distant wail of alarms echoing through the iron corridors. Her heart pounded in her chest not from fear, but from a simmering resolve that had been growing within her for months. The rigid caste system that dictated every breath she took had begun to feel less like protection and more like a prison. And now, with the city's very stability threatened by failing engines, the cracks in this gilded cage were impossible to ignore. Below, in the labyrinthine underbelly of the city, Cale wiped the sweat from his soot-streaked brow as he crouched beside a sputtering steam vent. The hiss of escaping steam filled the air, sharp and urgent, as if the city itself was gasping for breath. His lean fingers worked deftly, tightening bolts and adjusting valves with practiced precision. Around him, the lower caste's gritty reality unfolded in every oily surface and flickering gaslight. "Come on, hold together," he muttered, voice rough with exhaustion but steady with determination. Cale's thoughts were interrupted by the distant clang of boots approaching. He glanced up to see a shadow falling over the vents, opening a tall figure draped in flowing fabrics, unmistakably out of place in the grime and grit of the lower city. Princess Alara. She had slipped away from the royal palace, guided by her secret fascination with the machinery that kept their city aloft. Her silver hair caught the faint glow of the vent's steam, her pale blue eyes wide with a mixture of awe and concern. "What are you doing here?" Cale's voice was sharp, suspicion lacing every word. Nobles didn't wander into the lower caste without guards and, certainly, not alone. Alara met his gaze, steady despite the tension. "I need to understand. The city is failing, and I can't sit idle while it falls apart." Cale's jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're getting into. This isn't a place for the likes of you." She stepped closer, undeterred. "Neither is your world, Cale, but if we don't act, we all fall." Their eyes locked, the weight of unspoken truths and burning questions hanging between them. The rigid lines of caste and privilege blurred as the city groaned beneath their feet, demanding unity in a time of fracture. Suddenly, a sharp whistle pierced the air. Captain Selwyn's voice echoed from the shadows, commanding order with unwavering authority. "Princess Alara, return at once. This is no place for you." Alara hesitated, torn between duty and the dawning realization that her future and the city's lay beyond the golden walls. "I won't leave," she declared, voice firm. "Not until I understand a quick glance with her, an unspoken agreement forming in the space between them. The city was breaking, and so too were the barriers that had kept their worlds apart. Together they turned toward the failing steam vent, beginning a collaboration that neither could have anticipated but both desperately needed. As they worked side by side, the hiss of steam and clatter of gears became a symphony of hope, a fragile promise that perhaps, from these fractures in the sky, something new could be born. But the path ahead was fraught with danger. Every secret they uncovered, every alliance they forged, would test their courage and challenge the order that had ruled the floating city for generations. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the iron spires, Alara and Cale faced a question that would shape their destinies. Could they trust each other enough to rewrite the rules of a world built on division? The answer would come with the rising storm and the ticking heart of the city itself. The heavy clank of metal echoed softly in the dim workshop as Princess Alara and Kale leaned close over the massive, rusted flying engine. The scent of oil and steam mixed with the faint metallic temps of aged brass, surrounding them in a cocoon of whispered purpose. Ilara's pale blue eyes, usually so composed beneath her silver hair, flickered with a rare spark of curiosity and determination. Kale's soot-streaked face was drawn tight with focus, his dark green eyes tracing the intricate gears and pistons as he explained. The delicate mechanics that had kept the city aloft for centuries. If we can restore the pressure valves here, Kale murmured, pointing to a corroded segment, the engine might regain enough power to stabilize the city's flight. But it needs parts no one in the upper caste has seen for decades. Alara nodded slowly, her fingers brushing over the ancient blueprints spread out on a nearby table. I've studied these in secret, she admitted softly, hoping to understand what keeps our city in the sky. But knowledge alone won't fix the flaws it needs, hands willing to act. A sudden noise beyond the workshop door made them both freeze. Alara's heart pounded in her chest. The risks of discovery were immense. The caste system was a rigid barrier, and their alliance a dangerous breach. Yet, in this shared clandestine moment, the weight of their separate worlds seemed to dissolve, replaced by a fragile bridge of trust. Meanwhile, across the palace halls, Mira moved swiftly and silently, her auburn curls bouncing lightly as she rounded a corner. Her sharp dark eyes scanned for any sign of guards or spies. As Alara's handmaiden closest confidant, Mira bore the heavy burden of secrecy. "Princess," she whispered urgently when she found Alara alone in her chamber later that night, "you must be careful. The council's eyes are sharper than ever, and rumors of rebellion stir like wildfire. Your association with the lower castes could ruin everything." Ilaros' gaze hardened, but beneath it lay a flicker of gratitude. "I know, Mira," she replied, "but if we do not act, the city will fall, and I will not live as a prisoner of fear." Far below, in the soot-streaked depths of the lower city, Kale sat on a battered stool beside a cluttered workbench, his hands stained with grease. Joran, his stocky friend and fellow mechanic, leaned against a wall, eyes shadowed by concern. "Trusting a princess," Joran muttered, "it sounds like a fool's gamble. The nobility's world is poison to us." Kale sighed deeply, running a hand through his tangled hair. "I don't know if I trust her fully. But the engines are dying, and so is the city if nothing changes. She has knowledge, resources, even hope I've never dared to hold." "Hope can be a dangerous thing," Joran warned, "but maybe it's the only thing that can save us now." Back in her quarters, Alara pored over the blueprints by flickering candlelight, tracing the faded lines that sketched the city's lifeblood. Each gear and pipe told a story of ingenuity shackled by tradition, of dreams grounded by fear. Her fingers trembled with a longing she could no longer suppress, a yearning to soar beyond the golden cage of her birth. The days that followed were a delicate dance of secret meetings and whispered strategies. Ilara and Kale shared stolen moments in hidden corners of the city, their conversations weaving a tapestry of contrasting lives and shared dreams. Every gear repaired, every wire reconnected, brought them closer not only to saving the city but to unraveling the barriers between them. Yet, with every spark of hope, the shadows of danger loomed larger. Mira's warnings echoed like a distant thunder, and Kale's doubts whispered of betrayal and heartbreak. The city held its breath, suspended between the promise of change and the threat of collapse. As night fell on the floating city, Alara stood at her window, watching the steam vents hiss softly against the dark sky. Somewhere out there, Kale worked tirelessly, their fates entwined in a fragile alliance that could either mend the city or shatter it forever. For the city, Alara whispered to the stars, and for the dreams we dare to fly. The heavy velvet curtains of the drawing room were drawn tight, casting the chamber into a soft twilight glow, lit only by the gentle flicker of gas lamps mounted on the wrought iron walls. Princess Alara sat near the window, her fingers tracing the delicate lines of a mechanical blueprint spread before her secret indulgence she dared only in solitude. Her silver hair caught the lamplight, shimmering like spun moonlight, but her pale blue eyes were clouded with worry. The city beyond, suspended like a jewel in the sky, hummed with the steady beat of steam engines and the distant clanging of Giza, reminder of the fragile web holding their world aloft. A cautious knock sounded at the door. "Enter," Alara whispered, her voice barely above a breath. The door creaked open to reveal Kale, soot smudged along his cheek and hands, the faint scent of oil clinging to his worn jacket. His sharp green eyes softened when they met hers, the usual defiance replaced by something more vulnerable tonight. "You shouldn't be here," Alara murmured, folding the blueprint carefully. "Neither should you," Kale replied with a crooked smile. "But here we are." He stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. The room filled with the mingled scents of oil, parchment, and faint lavender, the remnants of Ilara's morning bath and the perfume she concealed beneath layers of royal protocol. They settled near the hearth, its embers casting dancing shadows on the walls. A fragile silence stretched between them before Kale cleared his throat. "I never told you about my family," he began, voice hushed. "My parents, lost to the factories, an explosion blamed on faulty machines and negligence. The council never cared." Ilara's heart clenched. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I never knew." "You didn't have to," Kale shrugged, though the pain lingered in his eyes. "But it's why I fight, why I fix what they ignore." She reached out, her hand brushing his soot-streaked fingers. "And I want to help. I want to change things, Kale. Not just for me, but for everyone trapped by these walls and rules." Their gaze locked, the unspoken truth between them growing heavier, feelings forbidden by birthright and caste but impossible to deny. Suddenly, a sharp rap echoed outside the chamber. Ilara's hand froze, her breath catching. "It's Lady Isolde," Kale whispered urgently. The princess rose swiftly, smoothing her gown as the door swung open. Lady Isolde entered, her presence as imposing as the iron gates guarding the city. Her dark robes billowed, and her eyes, cold and unyielding, fixed on Elara, princess. Lady Isolde began, voice steady but stern. "Rumors of your associations with the lower castes have reached the council. You tread a dangerous path. The traditions that uphold this city's order are not to be challenged lightly." Ilara squared her shoulders. "I am aware of the risks, my lady, but change is necessary. The people suffer under the current order. Naivety will be your downfall," Lady Isolde warned. "Your duty is to preserve the crown's legacy, not to fraternize with rebels and mechanics." With a final, piercing look, the advisor turned and left, the door closing with a chilling finality. Alone again, Ilara sank onto a cushioned bench, the weight of her double life pressing down. Kale knelt beside her, his voice gentle. "You're braver than you know." Days later, beneath the labyrinthine network of pipes and steam vents, whispers of rebellion stirred. In a dimly lit workshop, cluttered with gears and half-finished contraptions, a small group gathered, voices low but charged with urgency. Among them, Kale and Joran exchanged plans, their eyes flickering with a fierce hope. The council's grip is slipping, Joran said. If we strike now, we can force their hand. Cale nodded, then glanced toward a shadowed alcove where Elara had once dared to meet him. It's a risk, he admitted, but it might be the only way. Back in the palace, Myra slipped through the corridors, her small frame and quick steps allowing her to move unnoticed. She found Elara in a quiet alcove and pressed a folded note into her hand. This came from the lower sectors, Mira whispered, eyes shining with fierce loyalty. They're ready to act. You must be careful. Elara unfolded the note, her heart pounding as the words revealed the rebellion's growing momentum and the urgency of their cause. That night, as the city's gears turned and the stars shimmered beyond the floating spires, Elara and Cale met once more in secret. Their hands intertwined, they shared a promise to fight not just for their love, but for a future unbound by caste and fear. But the path ahead was fraught with danger, and every whispered secret, every stolen glance, could ignite a storm that might tear their world apart. As the first tendrils of dawn crept over the horizon, Elara's resolve hardened. The princess who once lived in a golden cage was beginning to spread her wings, daring to dream of a sky where love and freedom soared together. The narrow alleyways of the lower city whispered secrets of rusted gears and whispered rebellion as Cale led Elara through the labyrinthine streets. The air was thick with the scent of oil and coal smoke, a stark contrast to the perfumed corridors of the upper caste she was used to. Her heart pounded not just from the unfamiliar surroundings, but from the weight of what lay ahead. Almost there, Cale murmured, his voice a low rumble that mingled with the distant clatter of machinery. His soot-streaked face held an intensity that both comforted and unsettled her. They paused before a heavy iron door, its surface scarred by years of use. Cale produced a small key from his pocket, the metal cold against her palm as he handed it over. The lock clicked open, revealing a dimly lit workshop cluttered with tools, gears, and stacks of brittle blueprints. Inside, an old man sat hunched over a workbench, spectacles perched precariously on the bridge of his nose. His white hair was wild, and his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted a delicate gear. Old Tom, Cale greeted respectfully. This is Elara, she's come to learn. The elder inventor's eyes, sharp despite their age, flicked up to meet hers. A princess who dares to touch the machines of the city, he said with a hint of a smile. You're braver than most. Elara swallowed her nerves, stepping deeper into the workshop. She was surrounded by relics of a forgotten era, intricate models of flying machines, detailed schematics, and the faint hum of an ancient engine resting silently in the corner. These blueprints, Old Tom began, unrolling a large sheet on the table, hold the key to restoring the city's engines. Without them, our rebellion is blind. Cale leaned in, tracing the lines with a calloused finger. If we can rebuild these, the city could fly again free from the constraints of caste. Elara's eyes widened. The idea was intoxicating. Flying not just as a privilege of birth, but as a right for all. But the hope was tempered by the realities outside this workshop. Voices echoed beyond the walls, fierce debates among the rebels. Joran's voice rose in argument, his broad frame tense with frustration. We can't trust the nobles, he snapped. Any alliance with them risks everything. Cale's jaw tightened. Elara is different. She wants change. The ideological rifts within their ranks were a ticking clock, threatening to unravel their fragile unity. Elara felt the weight of it all, pressing down on her the fear, the hope, the immense responsibility. Later, as she carefully studied the blueprints, her fingers trembling slightly, Cale watched her silently. You're learning fast, he said softly. She met his gaze, a mixture of determination